Good morning, everyone. Very good morning to our Mr. Zaki Muhammad, our guest of honor, Mr. Hawi Lau, the SCS committee, and also the panelists and other distinguished guests. My name is Kwee Jiang. You can call me KJ. I'm actually from Tata Communications. My role in the company basically is actually to drive the strategic business development for managed security services in APAC itself. So before I continue with my keynotes, please allow me to share a video on one of the customers' digital transformation journey for you all.
As official connectivity provider for Formula One management, Mercedes-AMG Petronas Motorsport, and providing services to over 25 broadcasters, Tata Communications are rapidly changing the digital landscape of the sport. Over the last 5 years, Tata Communications has supplied 36 times the bandwidth to support the scale at which Formula One management's media platforms have grown, generating over 1 petabyte of data every season. Imagine that could be 2,000 years worth of continuous playback music. And our high-speed connectivity ensures that Formula One management's technical headquarters in the UK and their trackside operations work integrated unit, even from as far as 9,000 miles away. F1.com, enabled by Tata Communications, today serves 40.8 million unique users, demonstrating an increase in F1 fans turning to digital platforms to consume their favourite sport. In 2013, we began our partnership with Mercedes-AMG Petronas Motorsport. Together, we've helped to support the team's World Championship wins in 2014, 2015 and 2016, as we send data around the world in less time than it takes to blink an eye. Not stopping there, we're proud to be the trusted partner to test a number of future technologies during our first 100 races. Did you know that we were the first company to test a live 4K Ultra HD F1 feed, which today Sky is broadcasting in to all fans in Europe? Enriching the fan experience still, Tata Communications also provides connectivity for thousands of hours of video distributed to over 25 global broadcasters. F1 is entering a new chapter. Digital transformation in Formula One is coming. If we can do it for Formula One, we can do it for you. As official connectivity provider.
So the intent for me to share this video is to show to everybody that digital transformation is happening now, and it's happening to all across the segments. This video was actually created by us about a year ago to show the partnership between Tata Communications and F1 and how we actually support them in terms of their digital transformations initiative. Following with what Mr. Zaki has said, the benefit of going to digital, essentially when we engage with a lot of customers in APAC, typically they are looking into 4 key areas of objectives in these digital transformations. One is to drive borderless growth. Second is to increase productivity. Third is to enhance the user experience, and fourth is to manage the business risk. So as an organization and as a digital infrastructure provider, we have the advantage or the privilege to have a lot of conversation with a lot of organizations globally. And we can see that 97% of the organizations are already adopting a cloud services. And this could be from different categories, from a consumer, SaaS, or even IaaS and PaaS. So if take, for example, for a consumer perspective, an employee of the company may subscribe to Evernote for them to take note during their meetings. This is mainly for the intent of increasing the personal productivity. From the company perspective, a lot of companies now are actually going into the SaaS. One of the most common SaaS providers that we can see that a lot of people are subscribing to is actually Office 365 and Salesforce.com. On the other hand, Microsoft and Amazon, they've been pushing a lot on their cloud services. So in the past couple of years, we have actually seen incremental update from organizations globally. They are actually moving their workload to Amazon and AWS as well. At the same time, we also realize that during the conversation that we have with organizations in the regions, the enterprise adoption of a cloud typically is not limited to a single cloud providers. Most of them, when we talk to them, they are actually looking into multi-cloud strategies. If you look at the surveys that have been done by RightScales, Out of all the respondents, only 5% of the company has no plans actually to move to a cloud. This is actually quite surprising because I think like what Mr. Harila was mentioning is that if the company has no plan to move a cloud, she is quite devastated. But if you look at the other part of it, 81% of the organizations are already having a multi-cloud strategies. And out of the 81%, 51% of them are already on a hybrid cloud strategies. It's good to see that the adoption is going well, but at the same time, the enterprise are also facing certain challenges when they are moving into this cloud. A couple of things that you should want to point out is actually on the security, compliance, and governance as well. So now organizations or the IT department, they have to think like, how do I secure my data at rest? How do I look at the data in transit? How do I secure my data in motions? What are the cloud governance models that I need to implement to ensure that the data that is moved from on-prem to cloud remains safe in the cloud environments? So having said the challenges that they have highlighted, I would like to zoom into a few of them, and one of it is actually on the data loss and privacy, which this is a topic or the discussion that we commonly speak with during the engagement with the customer on their cloud adoptions. So I will share a couple of scenarios on data loss. Currently, I think the trend on BYOD are getting more and more common. A lot of employees, they are actually accessing the company data using their personal device. And in a lot of times, these are unmanaged devices from the organizations. So when they have the access to the data, a lot of times they will actually download the information to their mobile devices. And this is actually one form of data loss. Because when the information is being stored on the devices, and if the device lost, the person that pick up the device will have access to all the information in the device itself. Another scenario is more on the external threat. There are known vulnerable holes in the cloud that could actually trigger the data loss process as well, and also internal threats and maybe due to negligent use of the data usage. Another part on the data privacy, organizations nowadays do have to look into how do they comply to the various regulations in the country that they're operating in. One very big topic that I think everybody is talking right now is GDPR. For Singapore itself, it will be PDPA. So how do I secure my data that is currently in the cloud and to ensure that there will be no cyber breach that we can steal the data is in the cloud? Data sovereignty is also another concerns for a lot of enterprises because due to certain compliance or certain operating procedures, they will need to know where are the data residencies of the data itself. And data remnants where the ability to actually to purge data as when needed, be it due to company process or be it due to regulatory requirements. So with this scenario, how does this actually add to the complexity of moving to a multi-cloud environment? So let me give an example. If let's say, for example, that your IT department, that you are managing a multi-cloud, in a lot of times, the data that has already moved to the cloud is very easy for the end users to actually to share it from cloud to cloud. I'll give you a very quick example, Dropbox. So once you move the data to a cloud, just a couple of clicks, the data is being shared across to another cloud. So this has become a challenge for a lot of IT departments to be able to monitor how the data actually moves, how the data is being shared, how the data is being accessed, and who has access to this particular data. And also because of the multi-clouds, each of the cloud providers, they will come with their own set of security controls. The IT department itself, they will have to learn on whether this controls is provided by the cloud provider, whether is it relevant or whether is it aligned to their own security policies. Multiple touch points or multiple engagement points that arise from multiple cloud adoption also create certain silo policy issue as well. Say for example, that if I say internally I have a policies that I need to manage certain data in certain ways. Such a policy has to be translated and has to be configured on the cloud services. But because each of the cloud services, they may have a different security controls, these policies may not be implemented in a unified way, and it could be in a very siloed method. Another challenge which we commonly see when we engage with the organizations in the region is they realize that the traditional controls that has been implemented on-prems are actually not enough. I'll give an example. So in the past, or even for now, a lot of organizations, they will set up a lot of perimeter defense. They will have firewalls or IPS to actually to prevent the bad guys from coming in and good data from going out. Or they may have also implemented a DLP to actually to ensure that the data remains safe within the organizations. Back to the scenario that I mentioned about the Dropbox sharing. This is a scenario when an organization adopted a cloud service, the end user will have direct access to the cloud itself. And whatever that they do will actually bypass all the ITCA controls that the IT has put in place on-prem. So to the IT organizations, this actually is a big challenge as to see how are they able to actually to manage the data that is moving to the cloud. The last challenge that I would like to highlight here is actually on the data administrations, where this particular example is more relevant to IaaS example. So as like any new technologies, there'll be a learning curve for everybody to actually to fully maximize the technologies. In 2018 itself, it has been highlighted by the cloud service provider, misconfiguration is actually one of the biggest red flag that they realize. So what does this mean is that the IT administrators that is actually managing the cloud services, they may have configured certain access control wrongly, or they may have also implemented a wrong security controls on the cloud as well. So this will lead to data exploitations that's being sent out to unauthorized people. At the same time, because of cloud instances is so easily to be spin off, I believe that everyone here, at least for myself, I have tried to actually to spin off instances very fast. I think it will take me about only 5 minutes, I can spin off instances already. So imagine if, let's say, that in organizations, and this is some cases that we are seeing that's happening in the organization as well, sometimes line of business, they will just take the easy way out to spin off an instance in a cloud environment, do certain program or do certain activities, then after shut it off. One good example is a marketing of a company. What they do is that because to request a server access in the organization is very difficult. I'm sure that everybody will have this experience. They have to go through a lot of requests, they will go through a lot of forms, approvals, and whatnot. So they will just go to the cloud provider and spin off instances to run a marketing campaign. What happened was that during this process, they have also moved the corporate data into the cloud. And this becomes a challenge for the IT department as well. How do I ensure that, how do I put across the governance that the internal teams are not doing this, or how do I have the visibility that the teams are doing this? The third data acquisition point vector is more on the road use. Essentially, basically, is the road use in the instances that take advantage of the first two scenarios over here. In Tata, actually, we are also running our SOC. What happens that when we do a crawling on a dark web, we realize that there's a lot of compromised account from the cloud services that's being advertised in the dark web itself. So if anyone here is familiar with dark web, essentially you will know that you can basically buy anything from dark web. And over there, you can, when you go in, as long as there's money, you can buy a lot of compromised account. With those credentials, you could actually log in to the organization's account and do whatever that you need, because most of the credentials are all administrator right. At the same time, from our SOC, we are also seeing a rise in the malware activity and also advanced threat to the cloud services as well. So this is the top threat that is actually being listed by CSA, is Cloud Security Alliances. I believe these couple of weeks, I think there's these things that's going viral, the 10 years challenge things. So if I were to participate in that, most probably I'll use this. The reason why is that if you look at 10 years ago, the attack that's going on are actually quite simple and straightforward. At most, you will see that it's just a virus attack. The damage that they can do, most probably you'll corrupt your PCs. And you hardly hear any major financial loss due to this virus attack. And the motivations to attack at that time are also very different as well. At the time, it could be done by a hobbyist, it could be done by a lone wolf or pranksters just to prove to everybody that, hey, I know how to write a virus. But fast forward 10 years now, if you look at all the threats, top threats that are listed over here, are actually not much different from the threat that you are facing on-prem as well. So the mindset of moving workload to cloud, the similar mindset of implementing the security control has to be the same as well. Apart from this, I think the motivations of cyber attack now compared to 10 years ago is also very different. A lot of times, cyber attack is being done with the back of the head is to make money. And also some of it even state-sponsored as well to bring down certain governments agencies as well. So from this, one specific breach that I want to highlight is actually this one. I'm not sure whether how many people still remember this. This happened about 1 or 2 years ago, where it happens to a company called CloudPad. What they do is actually they have this IoT-enabled teddy bear. So how does the hack actually started is that the attackers, they, using a tool called Shodan, they actually managed to find out the MongoDB that's actually hosted on the old instances with a very weak security control. What happened was that they gained access to a database, and then they held ransom on the video and the pictures that is being taken by the teddy bear itself. So let's take another perspective. Let's say if the hacker have access not to an IoT-enabled teddy bear. What happened if they have access to IoT-enabled devices that's connected to a critical systems? I'm quite sure that the end result will be very different. It will not be so straightforward as what we are talking about here, and I think you'll be quite devastated as well. So it's always recommended that any organizations that are going to adopt a cloud is to weave in a security components or even security policies in each stage of it. Basically, there will be 4 stages. So at the stage of before moving to a cloud, this is where you need to access whether the legacy application that you currently have, whether are they able to move to a cloud. The API that's provided, whether would there be any incompatibility issues. The API of the legacy applications, whether would it create any or raise out any security red flag, because API and the UI of the applications will be the one that is facing the internet. And a lot of times hackers will actually leverage on this to actually go into a systems and servers. Apart from this, I think one of the considerations that organizations need to consider is actually the architectures, whether you want to go into a full cloud, public cloud or private cloud, and also what are the security controls that you want to deploy based on what is available and is offered by the cloud providers itself. So when you are moving to a cloud, one thing that I want to highlight here is that the shared responsibility between the users and also the cloud providers. I realized that a lot of customers will have a perception that when they sign up to a cloud services, the security responsibility are actually being passed on to the cloud providers. Actually, there's a wrong perception. I will share more in details later on as to the different type of cloud providers. They will have a different responsibility between themselves, the end users, and some are even joint responsibility as well. So when you are already in the cloud, this is where you need to access the security control that you have implemented and deploy in the instances, whether is it sufficient, or whether is it aligned to your cloud strategies, or whether is it aligned to your security strategies. There will be a deck later on that I will share more on the control models that is available for enterprise to actually consider on how to enhance their security posture. Last is on the governance and the risk mitigations. It's very often that we always remind the organizations that they should see this cloud as their own asset. Because essentially, if you have a standard operating procedures or you have certain policies on vulnerability management, similar mindset or similar thought process have to be used on the cloud as well. So this is a part that I mentioned earlier. When moving to cloud, it doesn't mean that the security is not your concern anymore. So let's take the example of IaaS. If you look at over here, the cloud provider will only be responsible on the physical security. The host infrastructure and the network control is a joint responsibility between the end users and the cloud providers. Anything moving out from application, identity, client, and data are the responsibility of the end user itself. For the example of a PaaS, the cloud provider will take on more of the security role, where they'll be looking into physical security, host, and network. Application identity will still be a joint responsibility between the end users and the cloud providers. but the client and the data is still the responsibility of the end user itself. For SaaS, cloud provider will take most of the responsibility from physical until applications. Identity and the client will still be a joint responsibility. If you realize based on this diagram over here, one thing in common, regardless whether it's infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service, is this part here. Data always remain the responsibility of the end users. And this is a key takeaway that I hope everybody will remember after today's session. Data is your responsibility. So when you are already in the cloud, there will be other security control models that you can consider to actually to enhance your security posture. Let's take the example of IaaS for Azure and Amazon's. Typically, the physical security and the hypervisor security will be provided by the CASB. But moving outwards from network security, a lot of organizations that we are seeing is that they are also deploying additional control like firewall or IPS to actually to manage the vulnerabilities, and also anti-DDoS and DNS security as well. A lot of organizations that we are seeing, they are also looking into protecting the host itself, protecting the data security, and having the right access control using the different tools, and also the application security and a security management framework on the cloud services. So one particular control model that I want to dive a bit more is actually on this called CASB. The reason why I would like to emphasize this more is that if you remember, based on the responsibility model just now, data is still remain the responsibility of the end users. So CASB typically is a solutions that a lot of enterprise can deploy to actually to address these concerns. Essentially, CASB will provide the enterprises a single cross-cloud platform for you to actually to have a visibility on the data that is stored across multi-cloud. For you to have the ability to actually to have a unified policies that is aligned to your internal data protection policies and to be implemented same across all the cloud platforms. Apart from this, they will also be able to provide the visibility on the data security, for example, that who is accessing my data, how my data is flowing, where is it being shared, who is sharing it, and some of the access authorization as well. So for the journey to a secure digital transformations, we believe that it has to start with security transformation program. And the right ingredient for this essentially are three things, which I believe some of people, because I just have a conversation just now in the holding room, I think we mentioned about people, processes, and tools as well. So these are the three ingredients that is actually required to have a successful security transformation program. In cybersecurity, it's very common for us to hear that people are actually the weakest link. Therefore, there's a reason why you see a lot of attackers. They will always try to look for loopholes, not from the technology perspective, but rather through social engineering or even phishing to actually to gain access to the enterprise environment from the people within the organization itself. Therefore, it's always important and it's good to have security awareness training to all the enterprise users. Basically, is to allow them to have a very good overview on what is going on. At least they have the awareness. And for organizations that have a slightly bigger or more structured team in terms of even having an InfoSec team, a red teaming and a blue teaming exercise will be very helpful. Essentially, this will be able to allow the CISOs to have an overview on how ready is their InfoSec team and whether the security controls they have put in place, whether is it relevant when it comes to a cyber attack. Next is actually on the processes. This is one thing that we would like to emphasize a lot, is that having the right people, having the right technology, but if you do not have a very good process in place, things could also happen as well. So two things here that normally is good for any organizations to actually to consider. One especially is to have a security monitoring and reporting process in place. Second is actually on the incident response policy and plan. So all these two processes are actually interrelated to each other. One thing is that for organizations which already have a security monitoring policies, monitoring the on-prem security control, it's good to actually to extend such process to a cloud service as well. The reason being so is that the people that's doing the monitoring, whether it's an internal team or whether you're working with an MSSP, they will have a visibility on the end-to-end of the cyber attack itself. And once there's a breach, this is where the incident response policy and plan will come into pictures. I think one of the example, if I may quote, SingHealth. I don't know when there is anyone from SingHealth over here. So essentially, if you look at the inquest, I think one of the things that was actually being highlighted was actually the escalation metrics. So when the tools actually detected certain threats, proper escalations, flow, and proper incident response need to be in place and documented within the organizations. So meaning that when in the event that there's an attack, relevant stakeholders will know how to address it and to come up with a mitigation plan and to execute on the plan. Okay? Tools will be more on the control models that I mentioned. It could be from an SIM, it could be from WAF or CASB itself. So one thing that I want to highlight is that cybersecurity actually should be seen as a digital transformation enabler. A lot of conversation that we have with a lot of organizations, we realize that the cybersecurity conversations will only come in at the very last stage. This could be due to various reasons. It's because they may have a very tight timeline that they need to meet. They need to migrate all the workload from on-prem to cloud. And because of this, cybersecurity will always come in at the very last. But at the same time, there are also a growing concerns that cybersecurity has become a boardroom discussion, meaning that it's the responsibility of the board members to ensure that the shareholders' interests is being taken care of, and also the brand equity itself. So it's always good to involve or to have this cybersecurity discussion from the beginning of every process that you have. Okay, so I would like to sum up with my presentation with the videos on how Tadacom is actually able to support organizations in terms of their digital transformations process. Sorry, I think there's some technical errors. They share some nice music on the background. So I've actually ended my keynote. Thanks for your time. If any of you would like to have a conversation with us, please feel free to reach out to us. We have a booth outside, or you can also drop us an email at business@tadacommunications.com. Thank you.